and trauma actually gets passed on. It's scientifically proven now that trauma gets passed on through our DNA, down the generations when we do
I did
not
not know that.
address it. Yes, it's a lot of the ACE studies that are pointing to that, and then the links to actual physical disease and things like
Wow.
this, like chronic conditions correlated with trauma. This needs to
Wow.
be more mainstream.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on Thrive Over Survive, where we are here to share stories and tips and tools to help you overcome just surviving in your everyday life so that you can actually thrive and enjoy your life. And I'm so excited to have my guest here with me today. Tammy Cho is a self love embodiment guide, face and body reader, speaker, coach, and healer who uses a proven face and body analysis system to help purpose driven leaders reconnect to their body, heal their past, and create impact, influence, and income without exhaustion and self sacrifice. I'm so glad you're joining us today, Tammy. Would you like to tell our viewers a little bit about how you got to where you are today in your business?
Sure, Emma. Thanks for having me. I'd love to share a bit about where I've come. It's definitely not been a short journey per se.
Right.
Um, and honestly, it was like I came from a place where I was in my own healing space in a healing retreat, and I literally got this download a message that I'm meant to do this work. And so that is sort of what propelled me into doing what I'm doing today, out of a 20-year nursing career.
Oh,
And
wow. That's very different.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And actually it's something that I was working on this part-time as I was like learning the waters of being an entrepreneur and business owner. And so
Right.
yeah, it's been a huge journey per se, and it was a journey of meeting my trauma again and again, you know? So
Right.
and yeah, and I'll go back a little bit more because it's like there's always a story behind where, you know, why, you know, how we've come to be. And so um, yeah, like one day I was essentially at work as a nurse, and I just got off the phone with a client, and I was sitting there and I started having heart palpitations, and chest pain was radiating up my jaw and down my left arm, like felt like a classic heart attack symptom. Like I was struggling to breathe, like my vision was getting fuzzy, and I was like hearing like, you know, that tuning between radio stations kind of sound in my ear. And
Mm-hmm.
essentially, I ended up being wheeled off to emergency in front of all my coworkers at work.
My
And
gosh.
I know it was yeah, really embarrassing, of course. But yeah, really, you know, traumatic in itself. However, like if like but leading up to that point, Emma, I kind of knew within myself that I was experiencing high anxiety. I was losing my ability to focus and concentrate. And
Right.
essentially, I even went to see a doctor to get like a doctor's note to get time off work, so to speak. But even though I had that in my hand, like I still struggled with like allowing myself to let go and just go off, you know? And I was
Mm-hmm.
so fixated on all the commitments I made to, you know, my patients and clients I was working with, and then my coworkers and everything. I just couldn't get myself to let go. And,
Okay.
you know, if you look at this, you kind of wonder, like, oh, is it, you know, is it her intelligence level? Like, why didn't you do that, Tammy, or whatever, right? And it's like, it really, it's me back. Sorry, you're gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say, I don't think that at all, and I think a lot of viewers can relate, and I can relate, like, hindsight's 2020, that's something my fiancé and I always say because high achieving women always tend to people please or they are, you're very passionate. I would never have thought like, oh, it's not an intelligence thing. It's just you're so driven. And in the moment you don't know or you don't like you can't think clearly.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and you're right. And although at that time, like, you know, I guess, and that's maybe my self judgment on myself a little bit. However, when I were to be honest with myself, and as I look back into this, like I realized that when I was, you know, like a baby, essentially, I was like abandoned by my mom at like 20 days
Mm.
old, depending who I'm talking to in my family,
Oh,
to like a physically and emotionally abusive father. And it was yeah, really tough because in a lot of Asian cultures, it was always a boy that was wanted, and I was the third girl
Mm,
at that time, and I was essentially not wanted and abandoned at the same time. And of course, that even though I was a baby, in many ways, energetically and everything, the environment I was living in really created that I felt that I was not good enough, and I meant nothing, and I had to work really hard, and I had to make my grandma um and my father happy, and I got really good at that.
oh,
Except it turned my own sisters against me, and I often like was sort of made fun of and was in siloed because of it. And
right.
so it was like just a really unhappy environment growing up. And I just got so good at just connecting and not thinking about what I need and just doing what I needed to do to keep everyone around me happy, even plan ahead. And that's how trauma works, right? There's
Right.
a need within ourselves to plan ahead to prevent the next abuse,
Yep.
and things like that. And so that's what I did, and I got really good at it. And even leading into my teenage years, and I was basically bullied at home and then bullied at school. And
Um,
that time I was like, I really wanted, of course, love and acceptance, especially going through the teenage years. And I gave away my body, and I was date raped, and I honestly thought nothing of myself. And I really wanted to end my life at that point, Emma.
right.
And yeah, it was as a and this is the sort of funny piece of it, is that at that decision point, the only reason I didn't end my life was actually because my grandmother was still alive, and she was the only one I actually believed loved me or cared for me, at least,
Okay.
and I didn't want to cause her to go through the pain that I knew she would go through. And so even at that point where to take my life or not, it was like I made that decision based on someone else.
Someone else. Yeah.
Um, yeah, and of course, and I did well for myself, right, Emma? Like I ended up, getting into a nursing career. I married a loving man who loves me, and we have investments together. Like I ran masterminds, and I was a millionaire before age 30, and like all these things, the white picket fence, right? But inside, I
Yeah.
wasn't happy. Like
Oh my gosh.
and yeah, and and I got used to again like solidifying this mask I wore in front of everyone. Like my friends said, you have everything, you should be happy, and oh, that's the past stuff,
Mm,
focus on, and so I just got so I was so good at like just pushing away what I needed. And
yeah.
so I just kept on sacrificing myself again and again. And honestly, Emma, it wasn't until my 6 year old, no, 6 month old daughter was lying there on one of those baby Einstein mats on the floor.
Yeah.
And she, for the first time, essentially hit one of the structures like intentionally as a baby. And then there was a community nurse sitting next to me in my living room. And she was like, did you see that? And I was like, I saw it, but I was so numbed out by that point.
Mm,
I couldn't even feel any love for my own child. And
yeah.
that's when I was like, awakened. Like I didn't know that was where I was at. And like if it wasn't for that nurse in my living room, so to speak.
Yeah.
And it wakened me. That's like it awakened, like, wow, I'm turning into my mother. Like I wasn't like physically abandoning her, but I was emotionally abandoning her.
Right.
And that's how
Yeah.
like trauma plays forward. And trauma actually gets passed on. It's scientifically proven now that trauma gets passed on through our DNA down the generations when we do
I did
not
not know that.
address it. Yes, it's a lot of the ACE studies that are pointing to that, and then the links to actual physical disease and things like
Wow.
this, like chronic conditions correlated with trauma. This needs to
Wow.
be more mainstream.
And that's the
And
whole point of the like, I want, like, more things like this out and open because especially with, we're dealing with something within the court system for family court and custody and just the way they assess everything. I'm like, it's so like, it's so old school compared to, like, all these new studies and things that are going on, like you're saying, the DNA and the trauma, um, and it's just, like, crazy to me that there's all these facts that aren't aware, like, people who are helping these people aren't aware of sometimes, or, like, helping people get out of these situations, or deal with trauma within the relationships. Like they're not, they don't know that piece. Cause I've never even heard of that. And I've talked to a lot of different, like legal aids or therapists, things like that. Like it's just crazy all the info that's out there.
And I can't quote the year right now, but
Yeah.
it's not like recent. This is like, well, the last, I think it's at least 10 or 20 years in that range.
Yeah.
And normally if we hear about, smoking being a health hazard, we would be like doing those risk factors when we see sort of clients, patients, or things like that. But
Right.
that even though they had the research, they didn't put it into, I guess, the tick boxes of the healthcare system, even. And they
Okay.
didn't, yeah, they didn't make like and I honestly feel that it didn't come into the mainstream that quickly because trauma is uncomfortable
Yeah.
subject to talk about, and it stimulates things even for the health professional speaking of it as well as the client. And if what I learned on my journey is that if the person I'm working with hasn't gone through and comfortable with speaking with their trauma and speaking about um, with vulnerability, speaking
Yeah.
with it with vulnerability, then they're unlikely to be comfortable to support
Like another,
another client that's come to see them. So what I mean is that if if I they and this is maybe a tip to help the viewers out there is that when you are going out to find someone to support you through trauma,
right.
it's important to find someone that actually has gone through it themselves.
Yes.
And yeah, and what I found on my journey is that I was seeing all these therapists and counselors, but it was and I guess this is an intuitive part of me that I could tell that they weren't necessarily um yeah, I just knew, and it was intuition side of things. And now that I'm a face and body reader, I could look back and see why. And I
Mm,
suppose, yeah, so it was, it's so important to have someone to hold that safe space,
right.
because a lot of trauma is a break in trust. It's a
Right.
break in trust from others, and then that portrays in ourselves how much we trust ourselves to be able to let other people in.
Yes, I was just sharing in a previous episode about this and how when I started my business, that was one of the fundamental pieces that I had to address was trusting myself and trusting my gut because as a business owner, that's a huge part as well, like when we're planning and strategizing and things like that. And I couldn't even do that because I was still trying to heal from my abuse and through that trauma. So like every time I wanted to make a decision for my business, I felt like I had to like run it past a coach or someone else, but they didn't know the inside of like what I wanted to do kind of thing. So I think it's very you bring up such a good point that um it fundamentally breaks down so much within us going through that and to be able to heal from that. Sorry, not to get you off track.
Oh, that's totally fine, and that's totally perfect. It's like when we know intellectually something, and we're not allowing ourselves to do it, like very much like me, like I knew I got that doctor's note, right? Like, why was
Yeah.
that so hard? Because it came from such an emotional place that I
Yeah.
cannot explain. And I was too afraid to say out loud, right? It's just easier to hold it all in. And it's like, and there's different ranges of this, like I tolerated. And
Mhm.
we could be in a relationship and we're tolerating that other person abusing us. Or
Yep.
we are in business and we're tolerating that we are not making time for self. And we
Yes.
could be as a parent and we're doing well in business, but we're tolerating and numbing out to the fact that we lash out at our kids.
Right.
You know, it's like it plays out in all aspects. It's not like just one part of our lives. It affects all parts of our life. And it's so important to not tolerate that. And that's why I say, like, in, I don't know, like when I speak with people, what I do, I want to help people create the impact without that exhaustion and self-sacrifice. Because like
Right.
when we're not dealing with our emotions, we're constantly exhausted because it takes a lot of energy to push down all the emotions that we don't want to feel, and then
Yeah.
all the mind chatter that comes from it, like that takes a lot of energy out of us, right? Like, I'm sure you can
Yeah.
relate.
Yeah. I think a lot of people who are watching, or if you're whether you're like overcoming trauma or in that survival state, or you're a business owner who can relate to, you know, the mental, we had a discussion about this the other day. I had a discussion similar where it's we waste so much energy going back and forth and questioning ourselves that it takes up so much time, and mental energy that we don't even realize or take stock in because it's the habit that we have, either trauma based or just, um, most of it, yeah, like you said, is trauma based. Like maybe not specifically partner abuse, but or it could be parental or some type of relationship that they've had that caused that trust to break down, like you mentioned. And I think that's such a good point. And I'm curious to, what kind of led to your aha moment? Because I'm curious, like how you even become a face and body reader. Like you've mentioned, like, and that is in your title and everything, but what was the jump or the aha moment from a nurse to the being a face and body reader now and helping these leaders?
Yeah, as a nurse, like I was doing my best. I felt like I was excellent nurse, and I just felt there was something missing, and I couldn't put a finger on it. I just knew that I need to keep on searching, and of course, like correlating with what I shared with my daughter with that awakening, it
Yeah.
really started. I started to try to do all these personal development courses, and of course, the counseling it and.
Yeah.
Becoming like a neurolinguistic programmer, trying to like master this mind, doing affirmations and positivity work. And I
Yeah.
was like, this is not working. The answer is not here. I'm still feeling all of this, and then I started to what I realized is that I when I started working with intuitive healers, like
Okay.
um because like the traditional therapists anyways, I just didn't find that they were able to understand me. And when I worked with intuitive healers, workers, whatever, holistic practitioners, they were able to feel me and draw out, say things about me that I didn't trust myself to even say. I couldn't trust them, I couldn't let it out, and they were able to tune into me. I'm like, wow, like I've never, like, wow, they see me, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's like when we're in trauma, we're like, we feel we're all alone, and
Mhm.
that, yeah, that, we don't matter, all this stuff, and yet we want help, but we're having issues letting it in, right? And so I dived into that energy work. I did Reiki, and I became a shaman. I did Tibetan mastery and bowel energy healing, and I was like I was feeling relief. And
Okay.
if I was honest with myself, it would, like, when I stopped doing those things, I still felt everything come back. And
Okay.
and so I kept on searching. I was like searching, it's like the mind, and I was searching the energy. And then when I started doing psychosomatic therapy, in addition to doing like the 4 years of emotional and spiritual healing,
Uh,
that's the answer, is like I had to come back to my own body to actually be in my body and feel and integrate and process all the emotions that were in me, that
wow.
allowed me to then, this is the awakening for me, is that
Yeah.
I needed to just let go of the feelings. And it may be like I understood that intellectually, but actually allowing myself to do it again
Right.
was very different. And yeah, it was yeah, at the time it was super hard. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And with the psychosomatic therapy, essentially is a study of the body, mind, heart, soul connection. And this allowed me to help people see the trauma that shows up on their face, shows up on their body, that as actually physically, you can see how it's affecting their alignment
Yeah.
and affecting being able to be who they are, because the left side of the face is your inner world and the right side is the public face, what we show to the world. And I help someone see themselves again and where they may be neglecting themselves and all that tolerating and sacrificing, from a place of knowing self, so that and seeing self, so we stop running away from ourselves.
Wow. Okay. This is relatively new to me. So like that's why when
Right.
we connected, I was like, I'm so intrigued by this. And I love talking about alternate healing ways because like you mentioned that you tried all these things and it didn't work and it wasn't resonating. And like I always hear like the same things said to people who are like trying to overcome their trauma of like going to therapy, which I'm all for therapy, like talk therapy. Like I did it, it's great. But I also think like what you mentioned, um, some things resonate better with other people. So I love that you found this and now are like you practice it because it made such an impact on your life. So when you went through your first couple experiences of finding psychosomatic, did I say that right?
Yeah,
Psychosomatic therapy.
beautiful.
Um, when you're like, this is it. You knew like that's what was going to help you. And so by addressing your trauma, you that led you to pivot. And were you doing other businesses at the time? Is that like, did you then pivot into becoming like, I guess, certified in this?
Yeah, like I was actually still part-time in nursing and all this, and I
Okay.
was, I became a therapist, and then, but I also became, slowly had my get my master's, and
Okay.
like essentially, right? It's all about this, like letting letting self in. It's
Okay.
like the more we're able to let ourselves back in to see ourselves, the more we're able to let in people, relationships, more money.
Mm,
So
okay.
that's the part, right? It's like trusting self to see self again, so we can loosen the, trauma, emotional block, whatever you want to call it, so that you
Okay.
could actually see yourself for who you are. And from that place, and then seeing yourself and then allowing yourself to be yourself. And from that place, it's like we're able to actually create more, whatever like our goals are, the whatever impact we're wanting to make.
Hmm. So going off of that, like what you just said, for someone who's maybe in those early stages of like they just heard about this or they're still trying to accept that, I'm trying to think of how I want to word this the best way. How they want to mm, okay, I think the best way to answer like ask this is how does one maybe like when you're working with clients or before you work with clients, what are some of the difficulties people might be dealing with that prevent them from starting this work? Like, is it that they don't realize, or is it, they're maybe like too afraid to like address this? Because I think that's a big thing for people who have overcome trauma. Like sometimes they're not ready to address that within themselves.
Yeah,
I don't
it
know if I
is.
asked
It
that
is.
correctly,
I,
but I
I
think
I
you did.
understand. I
Yeah.
understand what you're trying to say, Emma. You're totally great. Fine. And so it's this it's place when it is this fear, definitely is fear, because there, I mean, there's so many angles to it, but essentially the energy behind it is fear. And what I find when I work with people is that it's when we're in fear and we're doing things just for other people.
Hmm.
And it's not like something that came from ourselves, like you said, like even following coaches, or even our husbands or loved ones, like we're consistently asking people for opinions to, if I am I good enough, can I do
Yeah.
this, can I be this, you know what I mean? And so it's there's that place within us, that we keep on doing that, and it becomes like almost a list to do, and we're trying to fulfill this list, whether it's emotionally or intellectually or doingness of the world.
Yeah.
And we get into what's we have a lot of chronic stress and exhaustion from that. And then what it becomes is tunnel vision, because when we're
Mm,
stressed, we can only see what's in front of us, and we
yeah.
start to then only follow the list, because the fear, like we're humans, we're our tendency is to move towards pleasure and away from pain.
Yes.
It's a very natural human thing to want to do. And
Right.
when you're in addition to the stress, like people don't necessarily see that unless they, and not just say they don't know that, right? It's
Right.
not that there's not a part of us that knows something is off, something is missing. I know I need to do something different, but
Yeah.
how, right? And so I would say that's the first thing, just getting stuck in that cycle, that wheel of stress and doing and pleasing.
Mm,
The next thing is that, you hear about these things on the internet, or you're trying to look for things to help yourself,
yeah.
and you're like, okay, well, I know it's in the emotions, maybe you had that realizations. And when people go there, I find a lot of my clients don't know the difference between a thought and a feeling.
Yeah.
and
That is a
and
good
right,
point.
yeah, right. And it's like I didn't know, like when I started, like I had a therapist actually say to me, that's a thought, that's not a feeling, you got to feel. And she held no space. She just she just kind of like told me what I'm doing wrong, and I was like, well, I'm trying, but I don't know how, like, and
Yeah.
so I can relate is that a lot of people out there, they feel like, this stuff doesn't work, and it's painful. So your tendency, your mind is going to want to run away from it because it feels like
Mhm.
death. It literally feels like you're going to die if you go there, right?
Right.
And
You're super uncomfortable. It's hard to
yeah,
address some of those things. And sometimes it's hard to even verbalize those feelings. Even in like we have this conversation a lot about toddlers just because I have a toddler at home and I've been watching a lot of parenting things of it's hard for them to verbalize how they're feeling. And then I'm like, sometimes I don't even know how to verbalize how I'm feeling. Like it's just something that's not like taught well enough, I feel like. And so
yes.
how do you even say that? Like how do you like be like, this is how I'm feeling, this is my thought. Like how do we differentiate the two? I totally get what you're saying there. And like it is hard for people to do that.
Yeah, because it's very different from saying I'm exhausted, and oh, I'm feeling this tension in my body, I'm feeling tight here, versus like
Mhm.
saying I'm feeling really sad right now,
Yes.
and actually allowing yourself to feel it. And so when I work with my clients, I have sort of like this feeling wheel, and to
Okay.
help them sort of like, yeah, get you, because it's like, we're adult relearning emotional languaging because our parents were never taught.
Nope.
Trauma just gets passed on. Who are we going to learn it from, right? We have to, well, not have to, but so we don't have to do everything, but we must choose to, right? Like
Right.
to step into emotional leadership. And that's what I'm passionate about, helping people with emotional leadership within ourselves and embodiment of that. Because when we're not
Mm,
doing the both, it's the manifesting in our body, it's health challenges and things like this. So
yes.
it's so important. It all comes back to one again. Um, but yes, it's really allowing yourself that grace and compassion to learn like you were, back in the school day, you didn't know, and to have compassion that I'm going to support you here and to be with our emotions in a way that that emotion is the younger part of you,
Right.
right? And and another thing that comes up for my clients is that there's that whole when they're in their emotions, there's that emotion that comes out. It could be from your younger child, it could be
Mhm.
from a higher heart, it could be from the ego and the emotions from the ego. So it's very confusing. And it's honestly like I could have done it if someone wasn't there to hold a safe space for me to just like fall and learn in this emotional realm
Yeah.
and just unravel me. And it's the biggest gift ever. Like, really just keep choosing to trust yourself, like knowing that you're gonna like fail and be okay with it anyway. And just
Yes.
keep telling yourself it's so just I'm just gonna keep taking the steps because in that vulnerability is where it's that practice, even though you may not feel the freedom right away, it's like allowing yourself to
Mm,
practice a step of being vulnerable with yourself to say how you feel and just allow that to be a small goal.
yeah. Oh, wow. I think that's such a great message that people need to take away because they 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 don't trust themselves or they have a hard time doing that. I know that's something I've worked on a lot in the recent years. Um Also, going back to something you mentioned about emotional leadership, could you define that for people who are listening if they maybe have never heard it before? I think that would be helpful too.
Yes, yes, for sure. It's a place where we're actually leading our emotions in the sense that we're allowing ourselves to feel. We're creating the space for ourselves. It's making ourselves okay. Again, what I spoke about, the big part of it is having the compassion, accepting that this is where I'm at and I'm okay. Being able to support self in, first of all, naming the emotions, feeling the emotions, being with the emotions, and
Yeah.
eventually well, that's a bit separate, but when when you're in emotional leadership and embodiment of yourself, you allow yourself to fully be yourself, and you start to your wisdom gets stronger, your intuition gets stronger,
Yeah.
your ability to attract what you want gets stronger because we manifest from our heart. But when it's convoluted by all those energy blocks, whatever you want to call it, like
Yeah.
mistruths about self, that's when everything gets hard and dragged down. And
Right.
so emotional leadership also looks like the ability to put yourself first, no matter what anyone outside of you says.
That's
Because
hard
anything that
sometimes.
you're actually, yeah, yes, right. And it's like, and it's okay that you naturally will go to what you naturally will do. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh, like you're catching it after the fact, and then later you catch it during. It's like,
Right.
actually, yeah, actually, this is actually what I feel like. I hear what you're saying. And I think I'm gonna take some time. I just need some time to process my feelings because that's
Right.
what I need. Like, so yeah, to solidify that really, it's life, allowing yourself to let life flow through you. It's when we don't allow things to flow through us, the emotional flow. Emotion is
Mhm.
energy and emotion, energy and motion.
Yeah.
So when we allow ourselves to have emotional flow, we're allowed everything that happens, obstacles that come our way, we can flow through it. And there's freedom in that. That to
Yeah.
me is emotional leadership.
This brings up a question I think some of the viewers might be having if they are, and I know I experience this. I still experience it sometimes. I'm just more aware of it now. Is how can viewers who want to kind of, like you said, experience that emotion without like letting it um overcome them or getting stuck in that cycle of, do you have any tips or suggestions that they can do of so not letting like the overwhelm or the sadness, because I know like a lot of people coming out of an abusive relationship, they're like their life's been altered. They're just sad about the change. They're like not sure how they're going to continue. Or maybe they're dealing with a co-parenting situation and they're sad they don't have their kid anymore. Or like how do we not get swallowed by the emotions when we're trying to like feel it? Like maybe just a simple tip. If that's like a too deep of a question, like that's okay, you can tell me. But that's just
Yeah.
something that came to mind.
Like, two things come up. One important thing is that in the time of when it's happening, obviously, it's like, you know what? I need some space right now. I can't answer your questions. Just creating that space. And um, that's the first thing. And
Yeah.
giving yourself time to actually be overwhelmed by the emotion
Yeah.
in a space for yourself that you feel safe.
Okay. Yeah.
If you can do that, because this languaging of overcome by our emotions, like the first
Mhm.
thing is that what we don't allow ourselves to feel
Right.
creates the upset, creates the overwhelm. So you want to be able to allow yourself to actually let it go.
Okay.
So that's like sort of like a tip there. And we have to really feel within ourselves, because if this is something you've never done, whether
Yeah.
you maybe you're able to allow yourself to feel, but when it gets to a certain threshold, it's so difficult that there is a time and place that you need someone else to hold you,
Yeah.
because we don't know, like, in the beginning, we don't know how to create safety in ourselves.
Right.
Like maybe some of us had parents that one parent created safety, and so
Yeah.
you have like some sort of recognition of that, but there's some childhoods there's no safety. Like I didn't know that. I was like, I freaked out, I pushed and pulled and hit and kicking and screaming, even when I had someone supporting me, because it was it was that overwhelming and I couldn't deal with it myself. And I was like abusing myself severely. I really needed someone there to help me see what are the different aspects of myself, because I was confusing all of them. And so it's like, and it really like, right, and I think that really listen to yourself, that small voice that has that, like, in the beginning it just felt like some sort of light and it was so tiny and
Yeah.
clouded over. It's like that's the part of yourself that you want to listen to, and you just know, and you can't explain it, so don't try to explain it to other people. It's
Yes.
like if you feel a draw to like work with someone or things like that, right? But like, okay,
Mhm.
this is something I can handle and this is something I just can't handle, and there's no judgment, right? It's
Yeah.
because the person that you're going to work with is someone that's it's going to receive you and show you one extra
Mhm.
part of what you need to move through and what can support you. um and you're unraveling it, right? Like it takes time, and it's already locked in your body, so have compassion for yourself, right? We need some time to yeah, to unravel everything that was done. um
It's not an overnight fix, that's for sure. Yeah,
Yeah, it is not. And I mean, even in my role, I like my whole intention is to help someone, empower them to do this themselves. Like I have no intention of wanting to just support them and not build skills and
yeah,
resilience and leadership in that for themselves. Like that is, to me, I don't want to build reliance, because then that becomes another trauma hold,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So yeah, so it's yeah, so that's what comes through when you ask me like what happens when those emotions are overwhelming.
yeah. I think that those are really good tips, especially with I know something that helped me was, like, setting kind of like a time limit on how long I was gonna, let the sadness happen or, let it to feel it because sometimes when I was just, in that state of not feeling safe or not being comfortable, like what you mentioned, like you want to do it when you're in a safe place and in a safe environment. It would always be like, I'm gonna let myself have this time limit because I couldn't just continue to be sad. Um, or I wasn't gonna be able to function. And like that's the type of thing I think for anyone watching, like if you're so overcome, like what Tammy was saying, that you want to build that support system, then you should reach out to people like Tammy or someone to help you um and guide you through it because like she said, it's not always easy to do and it's something that you have to build in like a muscle. Like you're working out, you have to do it and build it and to make it a habit and learn the tools and um understand what that it's even possible. And I think that's such a good point that you also brought up of just with everything going on within yourself, some people who are experiencing trauma, they might think like there is no hope or there is no reason. So I think it's very important to say like listening into that little piece that you mentioned of you're meant and you're worthy of it. You're meant to have this success and this happiness and this life of that you can enjoy. I think that's like a common thread with a lot of the interviews I've had with a couple other people is um when you're in that such beat down feeling or like such state, you you kind of find it hard to believe. I think like in your story you mentioned that earlier. You were like, I just felt so sad. I didn't want to do anything, or like I made the decision to keep living for someone else, you know, and then you took those steps to do it for yourself, like to be there for yourself. So I think that's so important and inspiring for anyone listening.
Yeah, and I just feel called to like share this a bit. It's like, like
Yeah.
trauma will always come up.
Mhm.
When yeah, and it takes time to sort of release from our DNA and things like that. And so it's like it is recognizing it and just choosing to do something different and to feel something different. And it's
Yeah.
like when I'm parenting, I see where my trauma has been passed on.
Oh
And
my
I
gosh.
think that not everyone sees that, or we
Mhm.
see that, and because we see that and it's in us, then we get triggered.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and so just recognize that. Just I just feel like these triggers are telling us that how deeply this is still in us, the degree
Mhm.
that we're triggered, and to like we make mistakes as parents. Just say to our child, I'm so sorry I did that. This was coming from me. And I tell my daughters about trauma. Like I've created like a feeling corner where
Oh,
I just put up, they have these cards about what we're feeling today, things like that, to
yeah.
really just create the space. Cause I think there's a lot of, just because you're a mother and I'm a mother, I feel like, there's a lot of mothers out there who are trying to take care of themselves and then trying to be a good parent. And
Yes.
it's just giving yourself that grace to, yeah, just recognize, name it. So it doesn't take that power away from the situation, and that you're choosing to do something different now. And
Right.
you're okay. You're okay right there. There's
Yes.
nothing wrong. Right. And Yeah.
I'm
Just
getting
wanna
chills because I feel like I was really meant to hear that today. And like I've been emotional from the past week and a half of everything going on personally. And so like that resonates with me even like I feel like I've healed from a lot of trauma, but now it's how do I not let that happen to my daughter? Which like you said, like how do we prevent that as moms who are aware but maybe don't have all the tools to help someone else. So I think that's a great message. That like really hit home for me.
yeah, thank you. I did kind of feel like it was for you, but I just wanted to say it to everyone.
No, I'm glad you
Um,
did.
yeah, and another small tidbit I'll say on that is that, just because psychosomatic is a study of body and the soul and all these things as well, is
Mhm,
that, our kids chose us for a reason. Like, even though we're passing the trauma on, and,
mhm,
depending where you are in your journey with this, that's how I found with grief in all of this, that I actually
mhm,
chose my parents so that I can learn from those events and to be able to see the bad and to
mhm.
see the good, right? And to be able to heal through that and see where all my gifts came from the pain. That's how I learned how
Yeah,
to love so much deeply. And same with
yeah,
our children, they chose us. And so to allow yourself like to step out of the tunnel vision and to just expand your visioning out here to see that, wow, me and my daughter or son are healing together.
yeah,
And in naming it, I'm already teaching her something, so
yep,
I just want to speak that is something that really helped me because staying here, it really feels like you're stuck.
yeah. And I think a lot of just bouncing off of that, I feel like a lot of mothers are scared sometimes to step away from their abuser or step out like to try and heal because they think it's selfish. So like I think that's a great point of like stepping away, like getting out of the tunnel vision of, you know, you can make that change happen and you can have a safe and happy environment outside of your abuser. Um and you can start healing together and be that example that you want to be. I think that's such a that that also I felt compelled to share that because like sometimes when you're in there and a lot of women they stay because they think it's the best option and I'm not here to judge one way or the other, but you know, you can set that example and help heal with your kid. I think that's yeah.
Yeah, it's normalizing the trauma in our lives and making it a topic of discussion at the dinner table. Like,
Yeah.
honestly, that's what we talk about at home sometimes. Like, Dad, you're in your trauma.
Oh my gosh.
Becomes like kind of funny. Like, you got to have some fun in life. And, and I try to create that. And sometimes trauma comes up. It is not fun, obviously.
Yeah.
But at least we have the foundation now. And like you're saying, I think your daughter or son is a toddler. So it's a beautiful place to start.
Yeah.
And for anyone, there's no wrong place to start, right? And
Yeah.
I understand that older kids, they may not be as receptive, but just
Right.
know that as you change yourself, you're energetically connected to them. I see
Right.
time and time again, the more I work on myself, I see the shifts in my kids. It's actually quite amazing. I mean, that's a whole different topic and energy, but yeah, like it's like emotions are
Yeah.
energy, right? Like, and um, and I just want to like highlight something tangibly for people, how this looks like when you step out to the world, is allowing yourself to be vulnerable and maybe cry sometimes. Like one of the first I guess calls I met Emma through, actually, like I broke down in tears, and a part of me came up and said, oh, you're looking silly, why are you even doing this and showing yourself? And it's like no, like this is
Mhm.
what freedom from trauma looks like, damn it.
Yes, and
It's
I
messy.
felt so connected too because you were when like you mentioned on the call when we connected, you were emotional and I'm like that just shows how passionate she is and like she's working so hard at this and I thought that's why I felt like so connected to have our call and our interview and stuff. So I think the right and this is so cliche, but the right people here and like it's just like the right timing. You meet people and they what you're saying falls on the right ears. I know that sounds cliche. I hear that from like coaches or people all the time, and sometimes it's hard to understand until you live through it, I guess.
Yeah. Yes. It's very true, right? It's a journey, and
Mhm.
it's just learning to be loving to yourself through it at the end of the day and letting yourself flow with it.
That's a great core message too from everything, like summing up everything that we've talked about is loving yourself through it and letting yourself heal. And is there anything else that you would like our listeners to take away or anything we maybe missed that you want to make sure they have from this episode?
I just want to say, like, wherever you are, just choose in that moment, like, ask yourself, can I accept myself just for right now? I'm
Mm,
feeling shitty right now, or I'm feeling angry. I'm okay right now. And if you just do
mhm.
that every single moment and just give yourself that grace of like, I accept, I'm here. I don't need to judge myself. I'm here. I'm okay. Like, just like wherever you're at, like just give yourself that love today.
Yes.
Yeah, and really allow yourself to reach out for support. Whether that's with family members, myself, like maybe it feels like you feel drawn to Emma, like reach out, give yourself, what you need.
Yeah.
Put yourself in the communities that support you. Okay. And because you're not alone. It's just a
Right.
matter of vocalizing it.
That is so like important if you know for people who are dealing with this, if you are drawn to Tammy, reach out to her. She is a great resource. If you're drawn to me, even if I can't help or I don't know how, I will always go above and beyond to put you in
Mhm.
contact with someone in my network. Like that's such a another reason I love networking, not only for my own business, but it's to have resources for anyone who may need them that they might not have known. Like, I love that. I love being able to share these resources with people. That's why I'm so thankful that you took the time to have this call, have this interview, share your experience, and be vulnerable about it so that other people can learn from it.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
I'm
you.
I'm so happy to be here with you, and thank you for, giving me this avenue to just spread this message more. So
Yes,
thank you so much.
of course. I think it's a very important message, and it's a way of healing that isn't all the time talked about or made aware. So I think empowering people with information of what's available is so crucial, especially when they're in that confused or overwhelmed state. Like there are ways to get help and not just traditional. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much, Tammy, and thank you for everyone who tuned in. If you're feeling compelled to reach out, please do so. Or if you had a huge aha moment, we would love to see it in the comments below. And Tammy, the link to get in touch with Tammy will be in the show or the show description. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah, I'd love to offer a complimentary session there, so feel free to click on it if it resonates with you. Lots of
Exactly.
love to you.
Thank you.